checked in and ready to roll.
Go ahead, you're open to both.
3,
Put it over the slate now.
2, 1. Take camera 1. Go, John.
Welcome to the Washington Post.
Welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Leanne Caldwell.
I'm Yasmin Abu Talib.
I'm David Ignatius.
That was quite an intro. My gosh, we should probably just leave it right there.
I've hit the big time. Washington Post. I can go home and tell my parents what I did today.
Between Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Washington Post Live itself, we are now reaching hundreds of thousands of homes across all 50 states.
The power of this platform is it takes people into the world of ideas.
Audience members of Washington Post Live are part of the conversation.
I would like to ask the audience, how many of you knew before today's event that heart disease was the #1 killer of women? Okay, just me. Whether it's with cancer scientists or politicians.
This panel, I think, was originally called, 2 women against Putin. It really should be 3 women against Putin. So
the better way to get things done, as I've demonstrated, is by putting a group together and negotiating something that's good for both points of view.
So tell me what your plan is.
Oh, we have lots of plans.
I think Washington Post Live offers journalists like me a new way to do our job.
Their work is hugely important.
A new way to connect with our audience.
Hello, Senator Schumer. Welcome to the Washington Post. This is going to be fun.
A new way to deepen our engagement with people who care about the Washington Post and our mission of gathering news.
The Washington Post also said that we were the best film of the year, so that was pretty cool as well.
Yes, well, I mean, the Washington Post doesn't lie, Jeffrey. You know that.
I'm still having a lot of fun, Kat. Like, a lot of fun.
And their individuality comes through more so than just their title.
Generally said, David, take off your tie.
Yes.
So, it's a rare appearance for me.
It's a tech conference. No one in the tech world wears ties, David.
So
that is the lock from the night of the burglary.
Jeff Bezos bought it at an auction.
Right.
And we're trying to find out how much Bezos paid.
Right. Come back next week.
I'm so grateful to be on a platform like the Washington Post. I subscribe, I read, I love the Washington Post.
Thank you.
We need films like this. So thank you very much. Stephen, Lynn, it's been great to talk to you.
And I'm quite honored that the Washington Post should want to talk with me. Thank you.
I cannot thank you all enough.
Okay. Susie. Intelligence. We're seeing how innovation is being deployed to slow the effects of climate change. We are delighted to be joined today by 2 guests who are playing integral roles in climate tech innovation addressing climate change. Our first guest is Ali Zaidi, who is the Assistant to the President and White House Climate Advisor. And later we'll be joined by James Manyika, Google's Senior Vice President for Research, Technology and Society. My colleague, Evan Halper, Business Reporting, covering the energy transition here at the Washington Post, will speak with both about their work to foster climate innovation and how they see the future for climate tech. We will also hear from Samsung guest Mark Newton, Head of North American Sustainability at Samsung Electronics America, in conversation with Kathy Bird, Chief Communications Officer at the Washington Post. Our special thanks to Samsung for sponsoring this event and for this beautiful space that we're all in here today. It's fantastic. Please join us following this event for a reception upstairs, and we look forward to having you join us to continue these important discussions. My colleague Evan will be out here with our first guest, Ali Zaidi, after this brief video. Thank you very much.
We won't just tackle climate, we won't just make the environment more resilient and strong, but that society itself will be better for it. This stuff isn't like change way far on the horizon. The amount of investment we've seen triggered by this policy means that by 2030, the US will be capable of producing 13 million electric vehicles worth of batteries. That's a really big deal.
Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for being here today with us here and online. I'm Evan Halper. I cover the energy transition here at the Washington Post. My first guest is Ali Zaidi. He is the White House National Climate Advisor. He's also assistant to the president. Ali, thank you for being here with us.
Very grateful to join you.
So let's talk about the technologies that are coming online. So from your vantage point, are the new technologies hitting the market quickly enough to keep pace with cuts in greenhouse gases needed?
No, we've got to accelerate the pace of commercialization, of infrastructure build out, and scale up in every sector of the economy. Power sector should be the layup in all of this, but we're seeing perhaps not as quick technology diffusion on the 24/7 side in terms of the build-out manufacturing capability on grid components. And when you get to the hardest stuff, like industrial decarbonization, I think we made a ton of progress in the United States. First aluminum smelter announced in half a century that will deliver clean product, same in steel and cement. But we've got to run harder and harder, not just as a country, but as a world, to keep 1.5 degrees alive.
So in terms of these clean energy policies and in terms of these clean energy policies and what the administration is doing to try to move them forward, I mean, there's been a lot of onshoring of these technologies, right, and bringing them back from China and having them happen here, but that requires a lot of energy, as you're talking about. And it seems like the power grid is struggling to meet this demand. There's a lot of worry about how much energy there will be. Will there be enough? What's going on with that, and why is it that we're not able to build these transmission lines fast enough, that the grid is just struggling to keep up with the projected demand?
Well, look, we're the dog that caught the car on climate change in some ways. Our wildest ambitions were that in just a matter of years, technologies that were invented here, like batteries and solar panels, would also be manufactured here. But the plug load from manufacturing facilities and frankly from AI is showing up faster than any model anticipated. And I think there are a few different challenges to meeting that. The first is regulatory. So there's a big conversation that happens on the grid every time you plug something new in or new transmission needs to get built. And it's a conversation about who will pay for it. So that's a conversation we need to be having faster in every jurisdiction around the country. The second is on permitting. And there, I think the Biden-Harris administration's made massive progress. On public lands, it used to take us a decade to permit a transmission line. We've mandated that we will get the job done in 2 years. There's more opportunity on permitting, but I think we've made a ton of progress. But the third, and I think this is a little bit of a sleeper, is folks don't realize that one of the rate governors of the transition to clean energy has actually become the grid components that you need, the transformers, the circuit breakers, the HVDC cabling. We're not seeing enough investment in that in the United States or frankly around the world, and we need to ramp that up rapidly.
When you say investment, are you talking about investment in actually making these things, or what kind of investment are we talking about?
It's all about the manufacturing capacity. When I think about our 2030 goals, 2035, 2050, when I think about the world's decarbonization goals, the first thing that comes to mind to me is, do we have the factory floor to get there? That is the leading indicator of whether you win or lose on climate. And on this piece, we're not there yet.
So to get these components built in the US, again, we're back to needing the energy. And this is happening at the same time that the artificial intelligence boom is happening, right? And so that was not foreseen, at least not in this way at this pace. And how do you balance the needs of the AI industry, because that's also a national security issue, and building all of these plants at a time, how do you persuade states to do more to get this stuff online quickly? When it comes to fixing the grid, are your hands tied in the federal government because you only have so much power to push grid technologies forward?
I think we could use more tools in the executive branch. And I think we could use more tools at the federal level to be partner with states, to be partner with regional transmission organizations, to be partner with industry. But I also think we've surfaced some really good ideas for fast break place. For example, there's about 100 gigawatts of power that you could get just by doubling down on the generation we have, putting better lines, reconductoring them. Now, this was a tax credit actually that was supposed to be in the IRA. It fell out in the Senate. So the who pays for it piece is something that I think industry has been struggling with. There's about 60 gigawatts of nuclear that's been permitted at existing facilities just to expand that we could help lift up. And you see the announcement from Microsoft in Pennsylvania to bring back a plant. The announcement with Nucor and Google and Duke Energy creating a new tariff to surge a new plant. We're going to have to take advantage of some of these fast break plays. So we're meeting the 25, 26, 27 demand. I'm super confident that we can do both that near term and the long term, do it clean, and assure US AI dominance at the same time.
So I'm glad you mentioned the Microsoft 3 Mile Island deal. For those of you who haven't been paying attention, Microsoft struck a deal with Constellation Energy to bring back the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant in Pennsylvania, which has been closed since 2019. And of course, the other unit that they won't be using in this was the site of the nuclear accident 45 years ago. But in this case, some questions are coming up about you're bringing back an entire nuclear plant for just one company, right? And they're going to be getting subsidies from the production tax credit. We'll see, maybe even a DOE loan guarantee. So why is this? If I'm a consumer and I'm looking at this, why does this make sense, and why is it fair to have all of this load, which is the equivalent of 800,000 homes, right, for just one company to get all of it?
Yeah, look, it's about the productivity that we're unleashing in the economy and the benefit that's shared by a broad set of Americans. That's part of the compact of what AI can do for everybody. But I think you kind of glossed over, I think, an essential part of this, which is in the past, if a big commercial user came to your backyard and wanted to plug in a gigawatt or half a gigawatt of energy, a lot of those costs would actually get socialized around. What's unique about, I think, these new arrangements is that the tech companies, I think rightly, are stepping up to pay the freight, to make the upgrades, and to get the electrons. And at the same time, not only is the AI benefit hopefully shared, this is a plant that has been called for by the North American building trades, the steel workers, and union electricians. This is not just going to put steel in the ground, it's going to put steel in the spine of the American middle class. And that's, I think, an essential part of all of this. We've got to make sure community benefits are generated every time we take a step forward on clean energy.
Let's turn to EVs for a moment. So we just wrote in the Post about how in Norway they're selling more EVs than gas cars right now. And in some parts of the world, in China also, we're seeing just EV purchases explode, and compared to the traditional internal combustion engine. But in the US, there's been a lot of headlines about sort of consumers getting lukewarm on EVs, range anxiety, there not being enough charging stations. What do we need to do to keep up with these other countries, and why are we seeing some parts of the world just take off, and here it's challenging to get people into these cars?
Look, there are a lot of people who read the headline and stop. I like to look under the hood or the frunk. And what you see actually, I think, is a lot of really strong fundamentals in the transformation that's taking place. The investment from a capital perspective into new lines to build these cars here in the United States has been stratospheric and sustained. We're seeing the entire supply chain come back. Batteries, anodes, cathodes, the separators, lithium being produced, a circular economy being generated around this. And, you know, I think that part of it is the economics. We have achieved life cycle parity, but it is anticipated that we will hit sticker price parity in just the next year or two. I think that will be significant. I think part of it is learning about whether this works for you and what works for you. And I think the market's been iterating on hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and electric. Plug-in hybrids, I think, have raced beyond expectation, in part because their range has doubled in just the last few years. But bottom line is, last month was the biggest month ever recorded of EV sales, plug-in hybrid EV sales, alternative vehicles, and it was the biggest month ever recorded for U.S. manufacturing these technologies. So I think the transformation is taking place, and the good news is the transformation is taking place with American manufacturing, union labor at the front, the middle class winning out.
I want to turn back to artificial intelligence. So we've done a lot of stories in the Post over the last year looking at the energy use of these AI companies. And what's interesting about it is a lot of them are big tech companies. They're all big tech companies. And they all sort of had made a point of being on the kind of pioneering end of the energy transition. And they talk about, you know, zero emissions data centers, and they're matching everything with zero emissions energy, they say. But then we keep going to these communities where these data centers are getting built, and the utilities are saying, we can't handle all this demand, and we need to extend the life of the coal plant. We need to extend the life of this gas plant. We need to build this new gas plant that you know, will be there for 30 to 50 years. So I guess I would ask, in terms of the AI benefits the climate versus the challenges we're seeing right now, I mean, tell us about the benefits. Why are we doing this and expending so much energy and sort of creating so many emissions? What is it going to do to help us with climate change?
Well, first of all, for a host of economic and national security reasons, I think that the United States must be the leader on this technology. We're going through a training phase, inference behind it. There's trillions of dollars of economic productivity potentially attached to who leads the transformation. So I think there's a really compelling case for economics and national security. From a climate perspective, I think there's a massive opportunity as well. You think about the breakthroughs we had on fusion in the last few years. That was AI helping model out the reactions and help us get faster to the breakthrough than we have ever before. We have ML and AI helping us think about energy efficiency in a fundamentally different way. The Port of LA helping reduce idling and improve the throughput of the port and dramatically reducing emissions because of machine learning directing how the traffic moves through. And then when it comes to the impacts of climate change, AI helping us churn through tons and tons of satellite data to think about how to do vegetation management in a targeted and pinpoint way. We actually were able to lend to the Canadians some of our AI ML-enabled tools to help them fight the fires that we saw a year ago. And so I think there is massive potential in reducing emissions, in going after the impacts that we have unleashed on ourselves. And I think we can do it all while making sure that we sustain our path, in fact, accelerate our path to cleaner energy.
So these data center facilities they're just like giant black boxes. I mean, as a journalist, you know, we can't get inside them. We don't know what's happening at them. We ask the tech companies, okay, you're building this much in Omaha. What are you doing there? You know, they don't talk about it. So it does raise the question, because, you know, we don't doubt these national security applications, these, you know, innovation applications, but it's hard for us to gauge how much of this is like what you're talking about, the heavy stuff, and how much of it is, cat videos and crypto mining. And, some of it makes sense for, using all this energy, like everything you're talking about makes perfect sense. But we're seeing just a more finite amount of energy available, especially renewable energy. And does there need to be some prioritization? Like if you're going to come in and use, 400 megawatts of energy, to be clear about what you're doing and why you need this much, and it's actually something that will have societal benefit.
I think that the industry and the folks who are putting up billions of dollars of R&D money and infrastructure money are very interested in unlocking the economic gains that stand on the other side of this. I think there's governance that's necessary, and the president has issued historic executive orders on this and had incredibly robust implementation behind them, led by his Deputy Chief of Staff, Bruce Reed, who has really gathered the whole of the government to help build this scaffolding and governance infrastructure around this revolution in technology. But I think there are also market forces that are operating on prioritization, best use, and for everybody who's pouring money into training, they also are looking at what are the inference opportunities that are going to deliver the greatest revenue. So, and as far as the black box is concerned, it's energy in and numbers out. And they're trying to figure out, just like the rest of us, how do we harness that most effectively to deal with society's biggest problems and unlock the most economic value for all of us to be shared.
So in the couple minutes we have left, I want to give you the opportunity to talk some about the Inflation Reduction Act. Obviously, that's President Biden's signature climate achievement. You've talked some about what it's enabled the U.S. to do. We're coming upon an election, obviously, and public awareness of the measure of what it's done is relatively low. And why is that? And what's the administration trying to do to make people aware of?
Talking to you, Evan.
We're writing about it every day.
Look, we passed in the United States in the 70s and 80s the most historic pieces of environmental legislation the world had ever seen. The Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act. If you walk down the street here in New York or back home where I grew up out in Erie, Pennsylvania, you probably wouldn't get a lot of folks telling you the name of the statute, the day it was passed, maybe even who signed it. But they know inherently the impacts on the ground. They know how they benefit. They know the cause and effect, and they get when you're trying to take it away from them. We found that to be true on Obamacare. Republicans put up dozens and dozens of votes to try to repeal it. And we're seeing that again with the Inflation Reduction Act. 50 votes that have been posted up by the House Republicans, 50 votes that have failed to do what they intended to do, and now a dozen and a half House Republicans, usually united on the effort to derail Biden accomplishments, writing to their leader saying, hey, let's knock it out. Let's give up on the task of pulling the rug out from under all of these jobs. So I think, look, the impact is being felt on the ground. 330,000 clean energy jobs created in the last 2 years. The impact is being felt on the ground. Hundreds of factories being open to manufacture clean energy, in particular in places where factories previously had shuttered. And, even the retail credits, 3.5 million folks used those retail credits to help reduce their energy costs just last year, the first year they were available. So I think people feel it, they see it, and if you try to take it away from them, they will be very upset. And I think Republicans in the House realize that, which is why they have not been successful at their stated goal. There is a political durability to this, which is not to say there is not a real task in front of all of us who care about 1.5 degrees, who care about U.S. competitiveness. There's more to be done here, but we're not going to be rolling this stuff back because I don't think the politics are going to support or sustain that.
Ali, we're unfortunately out of time. We want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And don't go anywhere. We have more programming coming up in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
Hello, everyone. As we've just heard, the climate crisis demands bold, collaborative solutions now more than ever as we are on the cusp of a new green industrial revolution. I'm Kathy Baird. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the Washington Post, and joining me today to discuss how private and public sectors can work together to scale technological innovations is Mark Newton, Head of North American Sustainability at Samsung Electronics America. Mark, thank you so much for joining me.
It's our pleasure. Thanks so much for partnering with us.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. We are talking about a huge and very challenging topic, climate change. Can you help us understand what role home energy use plays as a factor in global emissions and the kind of impact efficiency can have on the sector?
Sure. If you look at commercial and residential energy use, it's about a third of global emissions. And about a third of that is residential. So about 10%, significant amount. Energy efficiency is the easiest way for us to today focus on making reductions in the sector. And I'm so glad to hear the White House out here talking about the Inflation Reduction Act. What a fantastic opportunity to inject, almost $9 billion into the residential sector, right where it's needed the most. Middle, small income households, homes that need to be retrofitted, and opportunities to make those homes more efficient, as well as to equip those homes with more efficient appliances.
Amazing. And we just heard a riveting discussion, as you mentioned. So what are governments doing to tackle this issue, particularly in the United States? You referenced a few things, but what more also could companies across a range of sectors be doing?
Well, I think here this is where the opportunity is, because it's wonderful to have Congress appropriate. It's wonderful to have the DOE put together these programs and to have this money available. We're in a situation now where this money has to go into the states. The states have to set up programs. So the partnerships between the states and the DOE is critical. But then also on the supply side, there needs to be products that can be available. And that's really where we play. Also, retailers are important in the equation. So if you look at this, it's really the epitome of a public-private partnership, where you have government appropriating the opportunity. You set it up within the individual states. There's flexibility for that to happen. There's a smart focus in terms of the way that this money is going to be spent. And now we need to all work together in order to get this to the public. And the biggest challenges are really going to be around making this simple, as uniform as possible, so it's successful.
Fantastic, and what a huge challenge to address. Mark, why is this issue so important to Samsung?
Samsung's a unique company. We're extremely vertically integrated. We make all kinds of products, everybody knows that. But we actually make those products. We don't outsource much. And if you look across our entire life cycle, or our whole enterprise carbon footprint, there are three main areas where there are emissions that are possible. There's direct emissions, there's emissions associated with electricity, and then there's everything else. In the everything else category, Samsung, like almost every company, that represents about 80% of the total. The difference with Samsung is only about 11% of that is related to supply chain. 80% of it is related to the use of the products that we make, energy use of the products. And so from a materiality standpoint, focusing on energy efficiency is the most effective thing for us to do. Now, of course, we're also going to do the Scope 1 reductions. We're going to source our electricity renewably. We've made significant net zero commitments and progress behind those in order to hit that. But in terms of why we want to focus on efficiency, it's because it's the biggest lever that we can pull. And everything that we do on energy efficiency goes directly to the consumer. You know, if I'm a consumer and you know, I'm working with a company or I'm doing business with a company, and the biggest thing that they are doing is focusing on their operations, that's great. But I'm thinking, well, go do that. You should do that, you know? But in terms of efficiency, with us having such a large focus on it, everything that we're doing on that, like I said, is a benefit to them and helping them achieve their goals.
I love that you talked about the consumer, because I think those, as we were discussing earlier, those are some of the bigger questions that we all have. But can you give us some examples of how technology can drive efficiency inside of our own homes, and then what that can mean not only for our climate, but also our own pocketbooks?
Sure. So the easiest thing people can do is buy ENERGY STAR certified products. I mean, think about it, taking all the guesswork out of it. DOE has done a good job of setting minimum thresholds for energy use. EPA now has a program on top of that, ENERGY STAR, which basically sets a bar that's about 30% more efficient than the average product. So you're guaranteed to get a 30% cost savings when running that product, or better, depending on where it is in the spectrum of the product. So that in itself is the easiest thing to do. And I think what's important is to make this easy. Consumer behavior is very difficult to change, right? And so we not only have to make it easy, we have to integrate it as part of the way that we design products, almost like a gift with purchase. So you buy the product for the performance, all the amazing features and innovation that you come to a company like Samsung for. At the same time, without a trade-off, you're getting the energy efficiency, which is really, I think, the easiest way and the most effective way to drive this across the consumer base.
Yeah. So you mentioned easy, but I also know there are some significant barriers that we face. So what are those barriers to greater efficiency in the context of home energy use at the moment, do you think? Is it policy, is it technology, or is it lack of investment?
I think probably it's education and awareness. So those are all factors. But the biggest thing, and one of the reasons why we're excited to talk to you guys, is that we need to get the word out on this. We need people to understand it. You know, when we were kids, they taught us about recycling. Everybody knows about recycling. I don't think there's enough literacy, really, in some of these more nuanced issues, especially around climate change and the ways that we can impact that. There needs to be more education. And there needs to be a dialogue in the media and in our school system that breaks it down in very simple terms so people can understand it. And so I think that education and awareness is really important. And so we try to get the message out as cleanly and as clearly as possible. And then again, make it so that it's sort of built in. So even if you don't know, you still have opportunities to take advantage of it.
Super fair education. What's your advice to people in the room, whether they are senior managers, entrepreneurs, consumers, homeowners, I'm sure we have all of the above here, about concrete steps they can take to help with our energy transition in the context of people's homes?
Well, I mentioned one already. Look for ENERGY STAR products. That's a really easy thing to do. Both, you know, in your home, there's so many different product categories, and it's a way that you can move the needle right away. Another is to start thinking about the way that these products are connected, and consider an energy management system. So our SmartThings Energy system, it's the first system, smart home energy management system, that has been certified by the EPA ENERGY STAR program. And it's a way of connecting these products and getting sort of a synergistic efficiency output that goes beyond the individual appliance. And I think that's something that is going to be a transition. And so start small, right? Start with that one smart product, and then think about how you're going to connect that, ease yourself into it. And I think that that's the way, it's taking that first step, you'll start to realize the benefit. And I think that's a key point. Trust is essential. It's got to work, right? It's got to work reliably. We don't all have IT professionals in our home that can install these things and then troubleshoot them for us. So we have to do that work and make this as simple as possible. If the technology doesn't work, people aren't going to use it. People aren't going to take advantage of it. So it's important for us to make it as easy as possible, and then kind of put it in the hands of folks to see the benefit. And I think that's how it's going to scale.
Very practical. Mark Newton, head of North American Sustainability at Samsung Electronics America, thanks so much for shedding light on how to create lasting, sustainable impact through energy efficiency. And now we'll continue with the rest of our programming. Thank you.
AI has the potential to change many ways in which we've thought about society, about what we're able to do, the problems we can solve.
While flooding has historically been challenging to predict, we know that advance notice saves lives, enabling better preparation and evacuation if needed. Now, AI-enabled flood forecasting is helping. What we began at Google Research as a pilot in Bangladesh now covers over 470 million people in 83 countries, where we're able to make predictions, in some cases as much as 7 days in advance.
Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, I'm Evan Halper. I'm a business reporter in the Washington Post covering the energy transition. Joining me now on stage is Dr. James Manyika. He's Google's Senior Vice President for Research, Technology, and Society. James, thanks so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Great. Well, I want to start with a really interesting conversation we were having backstage, which was about kind of a reporter like me who covers energy. I'm looking at this, we mentioned on the stage before, the 3 Mile Island Microsoft deal. And one company using, all this energy, taking, an entire nuclear plant's worth of energy, mostly for AI, we assume. And it raises the question, this AI technology is still in its relative infancy. And we're seeing so much energy consumption happen already, and we don't know when this trend is going to stop. Is this going to level out at a certain point?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to keep in mind why many of us are excited about the possibilities of AI and the benefits from it. I think the fact that we think that this is a general purpose technology that will help people, the economy, science, society. In fact, given that this is UNGA Week, the UN itself has actually just put out a report that basically highlights that if you look at the SDGs, something like of the 169 goals, sub-goals, and measures that they've got, they think that AI can contribute to 134 of them. So you've got all these potential benefits from it. But at the same time, there's all kinds of complexities and challenges with the AI, but one of them is the fact that so far some of the algorithms we're using, these transformer-based architectures, are very compute intensive. In fact, one of the things that's kind of kicked off this whole generative foundation model phase we're in was the transformer, which was invented actually at Google Research, which is the basis for all these large language models. And that particular architecture has the challenge that it scales quadratically, which means to make it more capable, more powerful, you need to throw compute at it at this, in a quadratically scaling way, which is what makes it very compute intensive. So as we all try to build more capable models to do all these useful things we're talking about, you end up having to throw more compute at it, and by throwing more compute at it, that means you need more energy in the data center for all the training and the inference you're going to do. So that's one of the things that's driving the compute and therefore energy intensity of these particular algorithms.
So we're in the situation where AI should be able to ultimately fix some of the problems that right now are being created by AI, right, or your energy needs?
Well, I wouldn't say they're created by AI. I don't think climate change was created by AI. But you don't want it to be contributing disproportionately to it. I mean, look, there's a recent study that was done by BCG, which basically suggested that AI can actually help mitigate as much as at least 10% of all the change. I see all the things we're doing, whether it's on climate modeling and climate science itself, climate mitigation. Happy to give you some examples, climate adaptation. So I think the contributions far outweigh some of the energy costs. That doesn't mean we shouldn't worry and do something about the energy and compute intensiveness of AI. We should.
Let's talk more about AI's applications for climate, because we're here in Climate Week. And how can this technology be used in ways that actually can help us solve this problem?
Oh, I can give you several ways. So first of all, one of the things that's been very difficult is to build accurate climate models in climate science. So today we now have breakthroughs, whether it's GraphCast, which is one of our AI, weather modeling systems, or Neural GCM, which basically is far, far better than all the other physics-based state-of-the-art modeling tools for understanding climate itself. So you've got those kinds of contributions. Then you've got on the mitigation front, there's so many examples. Let me give you at least a couple that are kind of very cool. So we know that one of the big contributions to warming from aviation is through contrails. You know, the kind of the white plumes you see behind jets. That contributes as much as 35% of the aviation's contribution to climate warming. And this has been known for a very long time. It's been very difficult to actually predict when the contrail effect happens. So one of our AI systems was able to make those predictions. And we actually flew over 100 test flights with American Airlines to figure out, could our predictions provide better routing for those flights? And in all those cases, it actually reduced the climate warming effect by 54%. And at an increase of something like 0.3% of the extra fuel to do that. So you've got those kinds of examples. There's all kinds of things around stop and go traffic lights and so forth, which we're now doing in, I think it's now 18 cities around the world. So you've got those kinds of things on the mitigation front. On the adaptation front, I mean, your video before this showed some of the work we're doing in flood forecasting. Another example, different from the one that was in the video, we're now starting to do work on wildfire boundaries and predicting those. In fact, we're doing this now in 22 countries. In fact, last year alone, I think we put out something like 30 million people received alerts in over 180 wildfire events that were incredibly accurate. So you've got all those things on the adaptation front to help society cope with that. I think all of those are incredibly beneficial. At the same time, as we were talking earlier, we have to do something about the fact that the computing required of some of these algorithms is quite intensive.
Yeah,
happy to talk about what we're doing there as well. And what
I would like to talk about that a little bit, because I asked this question to the White House climate advisor who was here before, Ali Zaidi, and I said, when we report on these data centers and we go to communities where they're kind of worrying about all the resources this takes, it's energy, it's water, for some people it's noise now. There's just, we're seeing these data centers get built in rural areas, and there's just concerns coming up where they're going. And we'll hear often from the companies about these technologies you're talking about, which are important technologies. Right. But it's hard for us to gauge, okay, is that data center doing that? Or is it doing, the million other things Google does, some of which may not have that much societal benefit? I mean, should we assume every time we look at a data center project and there's controversy around its energy use that, like, this is, if it's a Google project, key to these technologies you're talking about?
Well, most of it is. I mean, it's worth putting all of this into context. So, for example, data centers in the world consume something like roughly 300 terawatt hours, which is roughly about 1% of all the electricity consumption in the world. That's just data centers in general. If you then look at that, what proportion of the data center work is driving AI? So of the roughly 300 terawatt hours, Google, for example, is about 24 terawatt hours of that. And of that, yes, a fair portion of that is based on AI work. Keep in mind that most things that people don't think of as AI are in fact AI. I'm always amazed when people think Google Translate is is not AI, it's just Google Translate. Google Translate is now used by billions of people, and often people don't think of that as AI. So I think one of the things we have to get past a little bit is this idea that AI is not just generative AI. There's so much that's happening in the field that often most people don't even think of as AI. So if you go to that data center, is it serving you Google Maps or Google Search or Google Translate? It's all of the above. AI has now become such a general purpose foundational technology. I can guarantee you there probably isn't a software product that was built to do anything in the last 2 or 3 years that isn't using machine learning capabilities.
So Google's a company that has wanted to be on the front end of the energy transition and pushing climate action. It's like other tech companies in an awkward place right now, needing all of this energy. And one thing that I noticed, Google, Microsoft, Meta, they all say is our data centers are net zero, right? But those claims are sort of ringing hollow for people in communities where they're locating who say, look, you bought this wind energy somewhere on the grid, it may be 4 states away, but we're running this coal plant now, and the utility's saying it's because of AI that we had to extend its life, or it's because of the data center growth we weren't expecting so much demand. Does Google need to be thinking about changing the way it defines net zero or not using the net zero term anymore? And do you need to be doing 24/7 matching on your renewable energy so we can actually see, okay, this really is clean energy you're using to power this thing?
So we've been doing 24/7 matching since 2017, 100%.
Right.
We've set a goal that by 2030 we want to get to carbon free, not carbon neutral, carbon free. That's a big, ambitious goal, and we sure as hell are aiming to get there. And so we're working pretty hard to do that. So I think for us, particularly with regards to our direct operations, which include data center, our language, if you look at the way we talk about it, is carbon-free energy. It's carbon-free energy. So that's what we're aiming to do. You may have seen recently, for example, we built, I think, the first of its kind geothermal data center in Nevada with a company called Fervo, where it's up and running. It's already contributing to the grid. So we are committed to this idea of carbon-free energy.
So if your data center is 24/7 matching, does that tell me if I live in a community that if the utility is bringing on some more gas because they're having trouble with the managing the load, that it has nothing to do with Google?
Well, I can't say that for every community because I haven't gone to every single place, but I think what we're trying to do is to make sure we're using renewable energy as much as possible. So I think right now something like, if you look at most of our data centers, something like, on average, all of them are using 90% renewable energy in what they're doing. That's what we're aiming to do. Again, we're aiming to get to carbon-free by 2030. And that's going to take some work.
So I want to ask you about some of the other technologies that are trying to push kind of climate action forward. Apparently, you have a technology that has to do with the transportation greenhouse gases, and so your team used data collected from Google Maps driving trends from across the globe to create a project Greenlight. Tell us about that.
Well, Greenlight, in fact, it came out of an internal project to figure out, are there ways to predict and make a difference to carbon emissions? So it turns out that if you look at traffic patterns in cities using Google Maps and other things, there's so much stop-and-go traffic, and that stop-and-go traffic at traffic lights, which is why we call it Project Greenlight, adds anywhere between 10 and 20% extra emissions just by cars in stop-and-go traffic. So we started this as an initial pilot that began, we did initially in Seattle and Haifa as a way to see whether this could work to actually do that. And now we're actually doing it in 18 cities, including Rio de Janeiro and some of these cities that have extraordinary traffic. So we see that as an example where these AI capabilities and using information from Google Maps are allowing us to make that kind of difference to emissions.
And can you actually compute the amount of emissions difference you're making, and how much is it?
That's what we've tracked. So in the cities where we've done these pilots, again, as I said, we're now up to 18 of them. In the first 15 cities, the beneficial impact which we measured was about 10% improvement in the emissions.
Wow. Okay. Well,
now we're trying to add to more and more cities. Keep in mind that we've also been doing, in addition to Project Greenlight, we've been also trying to do, through Google Maps, eco-friendly routing. And we've actually done it in some countries. Canada was the first one where if you're trying to find a route from A to B, we actually will give you alternatives, including one that actually is eco-friendly in that way.
Yeah, I think we've all noticed that popping up on our Google Maps, and it's makes you, I mean, part of you's thinking, should I be out here driving? It's not helping the climate, but maybe I can drive in a more efficient way.
Right.
So let's also talk about your flood forecasting model. That's some really interesting technology. And so how do you scale a program like this to make sure it benefits the people who need it the most?
Well, it already is. As I said, when we first started this was in Bangladesh. It's actually my team that worked on it where this has been a known issue for a very long time, that if you could predict these so-called riverine floods and build these geomodels of how flooding works, and if you're able to give people advance notice with at least 5 days, ideally 7, the amount of this, according to the UN, the damage impact is reduced by 49%. So everybody's been grappling this for a few decades. So we tried something in Bangladesh, it worked. Then we tried it again in the southern part of India, and it worked. So now we've scaled this now to about 83 countries, covering roughly 460 million people who get flood alerts. Now, it's up to, and we're working with different governments to do this. I was in Brazil a few months ago where they'd had extraordinary floods, and they were actually asking us, please, of the 80 locations in Brazil, can you extend that to 300 locations? So we've been building and scaling. So if you go to something called Flood Hub, you can actually see the coverage maps in these 83 countries. And we're working with whether it's telcos and in some cases governments to make sure they use this information to deliver those alerts to their citizens.
And in terms of the way the citizens are able to access the alerts, is it dependent on them having cell phones? Do most people in these places have cell phones, or how are they getting the alerts?
Well, that's a challenge. So it depends. Of course, one of the things you see in the global south, and this has been on our minds lately, particularly given some of the work we're doing on AI and in the digital divide and so forth. One of the biggest challenges in places like Latin America and Africa are device costs and data costs. And so to the extent that more people can have devices and smart devices that are able to receive these alerts, that will make a big difference. But these alerts can also be sent on fairly basic phones too. Right. So that's where we're working with telcos and governments in different countries. Now, some countries have actually done a lot more than others to take advantage of the information we're providing.
Yeah, and I should say here that you yourself grew up in segregated Zimbabwe,
yes.
Which was then known as Rhodesia, and you called the experience, you said it showed you the possibilities of what technology and advancement and progress can make to ordinary people's lives. But at the same time, you need to make sure that people can access the technology, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so one of the things that became so clear to me, so one of the reasons I'm here for UNGA is because I've been co-chairing this UN's high-level body on AI to think about how AI can be governed and make sure everybody benefits. And one of the key things that has come out of that work is, first of all, if you look at the global south, we already have a digital divide. There's a real risk that that digital divide also turns into an AI divide. So how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? And a lot of what's required is finding ways to give those countries and those communities access to the AI ingredients, access to compute, access to models, and so forth. But in addition, there's a big need for enabling infrastructure. We forget that many places still don't have adequate broadband access. Some places don't even have adequate access to electricity. And so at some level, this AI discussion is a bit theoretical when people don't have basic connectivity and basic infrastructure. So one of the things that we collectively are going to have to get our minds around is how do we start to bridge some of those gaps? We're trying to do our part. I mean, so I'll give you a few examples from Google. One of the things we've been doing lately, so a couple of years ago, we built this Equiano cable. There's some significance why we called it that, by the way. It's historically, the historians in the room will know that, which goes from the top of Africa all the way down the side to the bottom of Africa. And we've invited countries along the way to connect to it. So countries like Togo and Ghana have connected to it. Earlier this year, we also built another cable, Umoja cable, which starts out in East Africa, in Rwanda, then Kenya, and goes all the way down, and connects Africa to Asia and Australia. So those are all intended to be ways to try to improve connectivity costs and reduce the costs associated with that. Those are some of the investments we're making to try and help bridge some of this digital divide.
And in terms of the risks of this AI digital divide, so if you're in a country where they just are not developing AI or the tools are not there, tell me about how that puts the population at a disadvantage, and what are the geopolitical implications of that?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. In fact, one of the things that was interesting, so when we were doing this high-level body of work, and of course many of us who are in this field know that there's all kinds of risks to AI, such as, obviously misapplication, misuse. Colleagues who are on the high-level body from the Global South actually insisted that we add another misuse. In their view, the reason why they wanted to put that as a risk is you have communities where there isn't enough adequate access to doctors, schools, education. So in their minds, one of the opportunities from AI is to actually give access to those things. So there's a lot of work going on, for example, in Africa and Latin America on access to maternal health information, access to education, which this technology will bring. It's the reason why you generally find that in all the surveys and even the work that we've done, the Global South is generally more positive about AI. That's not to say that they're, because of these possibilities, but that's not to say that they're perfectly happy. There's some real things we have to address. One of them is, which was highlighted in the work, is that much of the Global South has not been as involved in both the development of AI or even any of these discussions about governance. In fact, there's a fun stat, if you may find this interesting. We looked at, as you know, in the last 2 years, there's been all these summits and declarations and so forth around AI, and so forth. 7 countries have participated in all of them. There's about 118 countries who've not participated in any of them. They're all in the Global South. Mm-hmm. So the question is, so one of the big gaps we're going to have to solve is how do we make sure these countries and these places are also participating in the governance discussions about risks, opportunities, and so forth? And how do we help them have the capacity to be able to do something about it?
So along those lines, we hear a lot with AI, especially when I'm covering it from an energy standpoint, about why are we using this much energy for this? The answer is often this is an arms race right now. We need to dominate this industry so China and Russia don't dominate it. And so I guess in the Global South, the question would be, is there sort of a proxy tension playing out where, is China trying to develop AI there to curry favor with countries, or are there risks there?
No, I mean, what I hear, again, through this UN work is much of the Global South is thinking about all the kinds of opportunities that I was talking about, whether it's access to information, improving their economies, transforming sectors like agriculture and food security and so forth, and also the SDGs, right? So that's what I hear. I don't know if they're thinking much about these geopolitical tensions much. I'll give you one example that we hear a lot. There's such a clamor for how do we make sure this technology is developed in ways that respects and reflects the rich diversity of the world, languages and cultures and so forth. You hear that a lot. It's one of the reasons why even for us at Google, even just in the last 3 years, we've gone from where Google Translate could only do about 30-something languages. Now we're at 246. We added another 110 languages in the last 6 months. Those are languages spoken by 500 million people, all in the Global South. In fact, our goal is to get to 1,000 languages as soon as possible. So as a way so that people have access to information. So I think those are the opportunities people are thinking about. And in fact, actually next year, many of the African nations are actually could think of convening, I think it's going to be next year in Rwanda, an AI summit for Africa, which is going to be focused on these kinds of opportunities. I think that's terrific. But the real digital divide capability gaps are quite real. That's what we have to do. We all have work to do to make sure they can benefit from this.
It's really incredible, these developments. And along those lines, I guess I want to bring it back to climate for our final question. You talked a lot about some of these technologies. Is there anything that you're working on or can see being able to work on using AI that is really exciting and people should be thinking about?
I can think of a few things. I mean, one of the things that actually our systems did this. I think fusion technology is going to benefit from AI. So one of the things we've been doing is one of the classic issues in fusion is how do you do what's called stabilization in high energy plasmas. And we've been doing work in tokamaks in Europe using AI algorithms to stabilize that. I think we're going to see developments of that kind that are going to be breathtaking. I think that are going to be quite interesting. I think we're starting to bend the curve on the costs of AI training and compute. So, for example, if you look at the last year alone, one of the things that I think the focus has been on how much better AI is becoming more capable. I think that's great and that's fun. But the efficiencies of these algorithms are going up dramatically. So, for example, if you take one measure you might use is if you look at for training and inference, about a year ago, the costs were something like $4 or $5 per 1 million tokens to train and do inference. Today, they've come down to like 10, 12 cents. So there's enormous effort being thrown by us and others at how do we make these more efficient. And by the way, many of us hold out for the moment when we develop algorithms that are not based on this quadratic scaling transformer architecture and have algorithms that are way more efficient and don't scale and compute. So I'd say watch that space. And by the way, the side benefit of those kinds of breakthroughs to break this transformer architecture is that model building and development will become so much cheaper, and many, many more people, entrepreneurs and model builders, even academia, will be able to get in the game again. So it doesn't become this highly expensive thing that only a few can do. And that's exciting.
Well, Dr. Manyika, this has been a fascinating conversation, and there's so many more things we want to ask you, but we're unfortunately out of time, and we just want to thank you for being here with us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
And I want to thank everyone here who joined us in person and online. And to learn more about our climate reporting, please go to WashingtonPostLive.com/climate. And for everyone here in the room with us, I hope you'll join us upstairs for a wine reception. Our team will also be here to help guide you. I'm Evan Halper. Thank you again.